really blessed to be able to share my story of how God has been working in my life this evening. So, in my household, we did not worship any God, but somehow I knew He existed in some form. I believed in a God who was responsible for creation, but that His role pretty much ended there. With the exception of a few bad apples, I felt most people were in a position to direct their own lives just fine. And besides, I was excelling in school. My family was full of great people. I was investing in my talents. And furthermore, when I was in high school, I really fell in love with someone who was economically disadvantaged and yet morally upstanding according to me, and really a gentle person. And so from what I could see, people weren't perfect, but they were good in general. I remember speaking to a friend about religion, and I was completely convinced that things like prayer, for example, had very little to do with God. For me, it was more like a means of thinking things out aloud for myself, while God kind of listened passively. And my prayer style was as follows. I love to just lie down and talk and reason the solutions to my problems without seeking or following His input on any of them. There was no relationship of reliance between us because I really didn't think that He could offer me anything, and I really didn't think I needed whatever He could have offered. And from this perspective, the gospel just really never made any sense to me because I just could not see anything so corrupt about humanity collectively that merited sacrificing the Son of God. And to me, the cross was not only illogical and unnecessary, it was also foolish. But in my senior year of high school, God really just showed me a very clear picture of why each and every one of us needs Christ. And all within a very short time span, it seemed that everything that helped me to believe that my life was rightfully my own, everything that I had placed my love and my trust and my identity, basically came crashing down. And it started with my parents. Their marriage was never like ponies and rainbows, but all of a sudden they began to fight one another like I'd never seen before. And even though I knew that their issues weren't about me, I found the sight of them tearing each other down in front of me, to say the least, psychologically disturbing. And at the time, I really took my refuge in the person in which I was with whom I was in a relationship, and because for the past 18 months, I had really invested my whole self into loving him, and I think my attachment to him was so strong because his economic disadvantage in conjunction with his gentleness towards me helps me to believe what I believed, which was that people weren't perfect, but they were good. And, the relationship, however, is probably nothing like you're imagining right now. You may be shocked to hear that to this day, I have never met him face to face. And my faith was in human beings to the extent that it led me to seek companionship and security in man, even if that meant meeting someone on the internet. And sure enough, within weeks of my house becoming a place of conflict, I found out that his only motive to even talk to me, his reason for investing time into communicating with me, hundreds of conversations, was for the sole purpose of someday gaining my trust enough to give him credit card or bank information in order that he might steal from me and my family. And when I realized this, I don't think I've ever been so confused or devastated. For the next several months, I just vacillated between numbness and pain. There are a bunch of events that happened in my senior year of high school that I just don't remember because it's just a blur. There was nothing exciting, for example, about freshman year move-in. even though I had thought I would be so ecstatic to leave the boring Scranton suburbs. I wasn't excited whatsoever. And I tried to hide my lack of enthusiasm about life by going through the motions of being a college student. But it got to a point that I was becoming toxic to myself. And depression snowballed into thoughts of suicide. And I was very close to taking actions on those feelings. Out of concern, my roommate suggested that I join an extracurricular, I think mostly to just get me out of the room. And I took her advice, and I like to sing, but I didn't want to actually try out for anything. So there are very few options when those are your constraints. And one of them is the New Spirit of Penn Gospel Choir here at Penn. And so I just decided in my spring semester to venture there, not particularly intending to have a relationship with God, just needed somewhere to go in general. The welcoming atmosphere drew me in, and as we practiced the concert songs, this name, Jesus, the Son of God, whom I had dismissed as nonsensical for so long, kept coming up. And he seemed to be the focus of every song and passion of the choir members, and that's when I first started getting curious about Christ. Then one day I was eating dinner with my friend Darren. Is Darren here? Yeah. And she mentioned that she would be heading to Bible study afterwards. And, I asked if I could just tag along, and she said, sure. So soon enough, I found myself going through the book of Genesis with one of GCC's family groups last year, Army of One. I would say that this is when my curiosity about Jesus Christ turned into a thirst. And I just remember one day when we went over the story of Joseph. So throughout the passage, it talks about how Joseph's strong and personal relationship with God helps him remain strengthened throughout all the betrayal and hardship that he endured. And at the end of that Bible study, I was like kind of lost. Actually, not kind of lost, just lost, like totally confused about what I had just read and people we had just discussed. I thought God was distant and inactive. And this passage was talking about a God who remained close to his people, who directed and loved them way beyond their own capabilities. So I just asked Army of One, basically, I said, I'm new to Christianity, and I know you guys probably have read this passage 1,000 times and are very familiar with it, but I honestly have no idea what you guys are talking about, and I don't know what is meant by an intimate relationship with God. And I just asked if someone could please help me understand what that might look like. And I was expecting someone to just give me like a snide remark, like, duh, it's about X, Y, and Z. But instead what happened was that just about every person in the room answered my question, and they shared compassionately what it meant for them personally to be in love with Christ. So when I got home after finals last spring, I was ready, a little bit open to explore the Word of God. Having realized that my initial understanding about human beings was definitely wrong, and having seen what he meant to others, I was opening up to what he wanted to tell me about himself and about the world that we live in. He led me through the Gospels, teaching me more and more about his Son. And that's when I realized that the pain that I felt when confronted with our brokenness is really nothing compared to the way God's heart breaks about it. And that's why he sent his Son. Simply that through our relation to him, we would live eternally in his light, his guidance, and in his love. I remember one particular day I went back to the story of Joseph that I had read with Army of One and came across the verse Genesis 50:20. And basically, after Joseph had been hurt so much by his own brothers, he one day faced them, and this is what he had to say to them. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And that's when I realized that everything that had happened over the past year and a half or so, all the fights, the betrayal, the breaking down of everything that I had ever believed in was just part of God's plan to show me his love. And that's when I gave my life to Christ. So thank you for letting me share.